I have told you guys probably the most fulfilling time I had in my entire career in the military, in the Navy, was a time when I was living down in Jacksonville, Florida, and I was recruited to teach people how to rappel out of these old helicopters, these old dinosaur helicopters from the 1960s. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was the funnest thing to do. We'd take people up on a tower at first about 60 feet, and they'd rappel down the tower. And then we'd take them up in the helicopter at about 200 feet. And they'd rappel out of the helicopter from about 200 feet down. And it was the funnest thing. I was just obsessed with it for about 3 years. I couldn't get enough of this kind of adrenaline rush that I would get from getting to do this. And there's a scene of that same helicopter up in Whidbey Island, Washington. It's about a 200-foot hover, 300-foot hover maybe in a forest. And the way the Navy would use that rappelling tool is if a pilot had ejected over land, they would often get caught up in the trees, and you would need somebody to rappel down into the forest and go and climb up into the trees and help the pilot get out of their parachute and all that kind of stuff. And that's how we used it. And so I taught this course, and I just absolutely loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. But I was living in Florida at the time. And I don't know if you've been to Florida, but Florida's flat. It's flat everywhere. There's nothing you can rappel off of. I almost got arrested one time because I took a bunch of people up to a bridge, and we tied up our ropes on the bridge, and we were rappelling off the bridge, and an old retired sheriff came by, and he wasn't too happy with us. And but we got out of that. We didn't get arrested. But I was coming back home to Colorado, and I thought, boy, I could find some mountains out there to rappel off of. And so I took my gear with me, came back home to Colorado on leave, and I told my brother and my nephews and my cousins, I said, let's go rappel. I want to teach you guys how to rappel, and we'll go up into the mountains and we'll do it. And so we found a nice, short little rappelling place here. Found this cliff over in Grand Junction, and you can see it's pretty high. And I had taught my uncle and my brother, and I can't remember who all was there, my kids. I had taught them how to do it, and to this point, we've been going off 10 foot, 20 foot, 30 foot kind of things, and it wasn't too bad. But we got up on this cliff, and I was scared. I was scared of this thing. But, we threw our ropes over the side. You can see somebody rappelling down there off the side of that thing. It was a massive, massive cliff. And I'll never forget my brother when he was going over the side. Something that I would tell all my students in the Navy, they come to this place, and I should have talked about it right here. You come to this place where you hook up the gear, you put that harness on yourself, you hook the rope up, you put all those carabiners on, and you tighten them all down, and you make sure all your gear is checked out. And then there comes this point where you have to step into that doorway. And you hold on to the roof of that doorway, and then you have to let yourself ease back into that equipment. And it is a frightening thing to do. And many a student wouldn't let go of that helicopter. They just wouldn't do it. They couldn't. They were just so fearful. And you can see why. But at some point, you have to. You have to completely let go of everything else, and you have to sit back into that harness and trust that that harness and that rope and those carabiners and all that equipment is going to hold on to you until you get down to the ground. You have to put your faith, your trust into that gear. And as my brother was going over the side of that cliff out there in Grand Junction, you can see that's actually me. I don't have a picture of him going over the side, but as he was going over the side, I was checking him out and making sure everything was good, and he wouldn't let go. He wouldn't let go. There was like a little railing or something you grab onto, and he couldn't let go of that railing. And I kept trying to say, you're okay. Just put your faith in the equipment. Trust the equipment. It's okay. You're not going to fall. You're not going to fall. And he looked up at me, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, Glenn, I don't trust this equipment. I trust you. I trust you. And that's the only reason I'm hanging off the side of this cliff. I trust you. I don't trust this equipment. I believe in you. And so over he went, and of course it was all good. You see, though, up at we didn't realize this till we were all on the ground. The rock that we were hooked up to and rappelling off of, it was the last piece of rock that hadn't fallen off the cliff. You see that little outcropping there? It was the last piece that hadn't slid off the cliff. But I have always, ever since that time, I have always felt that this idea of putting your faith in God was so well represented by this idea of rappelling. At some point, you have to let go. You have to let go and put your faith completely in God, completely in Jesus Christ, completely in the words that he has revealed to us, the truth that he has revealed to us through his word. You can't hold on to other things hoping they're going to save you. You can't hold on to other ideologies. You can't hold on to the faith of your father, the faith of your grandmother. You have to have a faith of your own, and you have to sink back into that faith. And as you do that, you start hearing that rope, and the rope getting tight, and your harness getting tight, and it's uncomfortable. And you have that fear that sets in your heart. Is it going to hold me? Is it going to hold me? And at the very rubber meets the road kind of a level, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is ultimately what you have to completely sink into. Completely embrace the idea that yes, Jesus Christ died on that cross, but he didn't stay dead. Somehow, some way, God miraculously brought him back to life. Are you able to sink into that? The disciples were not. Until he was actually resurrected, until they realized that he had prophesied that he was going to be killed and then resurrected 3 days later. Until they realized that the Bible has said that the Messiah was not going to see corruption. The Holy One was not going to see corruption. He was going to live again. The passage that our brother read here this morning. I'm going away for a little while, and you won't see me for a little while, but then you're going to see me again, and then you'll be joyful. All those things started coming back in their minds. And all of a sudden, it's not just my eyesight, my trust in what I can see, my trust in what my puny little mind can believe, my trust in what somebody else has told me, what my pastors told me, what my mom and dad told me, what my grandpa told me. I see it for myself. I see it for myself. I see the truth of the resurrection. I see the prophecies that the Bible has spoken about. I see what Jesus himself knew and said. And I make a decision. I love God. I love his truth. I love his grace and mercy in my life. But I love the most that he cared enough to send his son down to this place that I may be given eternal life. Because I certainly don't deserve it. I certainly am not a righteous man myself. I certainly don't deserve the righteousness that he is going to attribute to me. I don't deserve it, but I believe that God has granted it. And when all those things come together, faith happens. Belief happens.